My guard donkeys smashed the HOA's expensive lights, and they billed me $96,000. But one property survey exposed the mistake they never expected. Every light stood on my land. Welcome back, everyone. Before today's story begins, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story is released. Your support means more than you know. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing incredible stories with viewers around the world. And before we begin, tell me this, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's dive into today's unforgettable story. $96,000? For lights you planted in my pasture? Marissa Langford didn't blink. She stood outside my gate in polished brown boots, holding a certified damage assessment against her cream jacket while the October wind pushed loose strands of blonde hair across her face. Behind me, Jasper, my largest guard donkey, rubbed his neck against a bent black light pole. Metal squealed. Marissa's eyes narrowed. "Please control your animal, Mr. Whitmore." I turned slowly. Jasper stopped scratching and stared at us with the blank innocence only a 1,200-pound troublemaker can manage. "My name is Caleb Whitmore. I'm 46, a fencing contractor by trade, and I run livestock on 180 acres my family has held longer than Silver Pines Estates has existed. I know fences, I know livestock, and I know where my property ends. At least, I thought I did." Marissa extended the envelope. "Your animals caused extensive damage to association property." I opened it. The first page carried the Silver Pines logo. The second carried a number large enough to make me laugh. $96,000. Replacement fixtures, electrical components, contractor labor, landscaping restoration, administrative costs. I looked past her toward the eastern pasture. A line of decorative black poles stretched along the grass behind the subdivision. Several leaned at ugly angles. One lay flat, its solar fixture shattered beside it. 3 weeks earlier, those lights hadn't existed. Now apparently I owed the HOA almost $100,000 for them. "You're serious?" "Completely." Marissa opened a leather folder and produced photographs. There was Jasper beside one damaged pole. Mabel, my gray Jenny, stood near another. The third image showed Otis pushing his shoulder against a fixture like it had personally insulted him. I couldn't argue with the pictures. My donkeys had been there. They were guard animals, kept with my goats because they were territorial enough to discourage stray dogs and coyotes. They also scratched against fence posts, gates, feeders, trees, and anything else sturdy enough to tolerate them. Apparently, these lights hadn't qualified. "You'll need to contact your insurer," Marissa said. I kept looking at the photographs. Something bothered me. Not the animals. The background. Behind Jasper stood an old cedar fence post, silver with age. I recognized it because I'd replaced the adjoining section myself 6 summers earlier. Beyond that, half hidden in brown grass, was an orange survey cap. I looked toward the pasture, then back at the photograph. Who installed these? Silver Pines. I know who paid for them. Who installed them? Bright Path Outdoor Services. And who told them where the property line was? Her expression shifted slightly. "Our improvement corridor is association controlled." That wasn't my question. She closed the folder. "The board expects payment within 30 days. I stepped through the gate and walked toward the nearest damaged light. Marissa followed until her polished boots reached the muddy edge of the pasture. I kept going. 20 feet. 30. Then I stopped beside the fallen pole. The old fence line sat behind me. The subdivision sat farther beyond that. I looked down at the concrete footing buried in my grass. Then I looked back at Marissa. She was still holding that $96,000 bill like it settled everything. I pointed at the ground. "Before we discuss what my donkeys broke, Marissa, I think you'd better explain something." She frowned. "What?" I tapped the concrete footing with my boot. "Why is HOA property standing this far inside my pasture?" The pasture had been there long before Silver Pines learned to call itself a community. My grandfather bought the first 120 acres in 1974. My father added 60 more when the neighboring dairy farm folded, and by the time the land came to me, I knew every corner of it by memory. The Low Creek crossing, the limestone ridge, the cottonwoods along the northern fence. and the eastern boundary where our pasture met what used to be open soybean fields. Silver pines arrived much later. First came survey trucks, then bulldozers, then rows of two-story houses with stone mailboxes, matching street signs, and lawns green enough to look painted. I didn't object. Their land was theirs. Mine was mine. That arrangement worked for years. My ranch never joined the HOA. I never signed covenants, paid dues, or asked permission to repair a gate. I made my living installing agricultural fencing across 3 counties, and I kept goats on the home acreage. That was where Jasper, Mabel, and Otis came in. Guard donkeys aren't decorative pets. They're alert, territorial animals that can make wandering dogs reconsider their career choices. Mine spent most days moving quietly with the herd, ears turning toward every unfamiliar sound. They also had opinions about new objects, especially Jasper. 3 weeks before Marissa handed me that $96,000 bill, I heard machinery near the eastern pasture. A contractor crew was unloading black poles from a flatbed. The air smelled like cut grass and diesel exhaust. I walked over. One worker was drilling holes while another studied coordinates on a tablet. "What are you putting in?" "Security lights." "For Silver Pines?" He nodded. The poles were sleek, maybe 12 feet tall, each topped with a rectangular solar fixture. I looked toward my old fence line. Years earlier, sections had been moved inward for easier livestock maintenance. The legal boundary wasn't identical to the fence, which was why old iron survey pins mattered. "You sure you're on the right side?" The worker glanced at his tablet. "These are the coordinates we were given." "By who?" "HOA project manager." That answer didn't satisfy me, but I had a fencing job waiting 40 miles away. Before leaving, I walked to an old orange-capped survey marker half buried beneath grass. It was still there. I made a mental note to check the installation later. Then life got busy. 2 gates needed rebuilding after a storm. A customer changed 300 feet of fence line at the last minute. One of my goats developed an infection that cost me half a Saturday at the veterinarian. Meanwhile, the lights went up. At night, they cast white pools across the eastern pasture. Marissa called them a security improvement corridor. I called them bright. Jasper called them suspicious. The first evening they activated, he stood 30 yards away with his ears forward, staring at the nearest pole. "Leave it alone," I told him. He flicked one ear toward me. That was not agreement. A few days later, I found fresh dirt disturbed around one concrete footing. Nothing was damaged yet. Still, I called Silver Pines. Marissa answered. "Your lights may be over the property line. They're within the community buffer. Do you have a survey?" "We have development maps." Those weren't the same thing. I knew that better than most. I looked down the line of new poles, then toward the old survey marker disappearing beneath autumn grass. Something in my gut told me to measure it. I should have done it that afternoon, because 5 nights later, a hard wind came through after midnight. And just before sunrise, I heard the first crash. The first crash sounded like somebody had dropped a steel ladder onto concrete. I was awake before the second one. Clang. Then a hollow crack carried across the pasture. I pulled on jeans, shoved my feet into boots, and stepped onto the porch. The storm had already moved east. Cold pre-dawn air smelled of wet grass and mud. Clouds dragged across a pale horizon while water dripped steadily from the barn roof. Then I saw movement near the eastern pasture. 3 long ears. "Jasper." I grabbed my flashlight. By the time I reached the field, the damage was obvious. One light pole lay completely flat. Another leaned almost 45 degrees, its concrete footing cracked loose from the saturated ground. A third fixture had lost its solar panel, which glittered in the grass 20 feet away. Otis stood beside it chewing weeds. Mabel watched me approach. Jasper was rubbing his shoulder against another pole. "Hey." He stepped away. The pole swayed. I closed my eyes. Fantastic. The donkeys hadn't gone anywhere they weren't supposed to be. The livestock fence was intact. The gate remained chained. Whatever had happened inside their normal pasture. I checked the animals first. No cuts. No limping. No obvious injuries. Then I photographed every damaged fixture from multiple angles. Mud told most of the story. Hoofprints circled the poles. One fixture had probably loosened when Jasper rubbed against it. Saturated soil and wind did the rest. Once one pole came down, the animals apparently investigated the others. Annoying? Absolutely. But I wasn't going to pretend my animals had nothing to do with it. At 7:18 that morning, I emailed Silver Pines. Free lights damaged. Livestock involved. Please contact me regarding ownership and exact installation boundary before repairs begin. I attached photographs. Marissa called 9 minutes later. You need to remove those animals immediately. From my pasture? From the lighting corridor. There is no fenced lighting corridor. They've destroyed association improvements. Then send me the recorded survey showing those improvements are on association property. Silence. Caleb, this isn't complicated. It became complicated when you poured concrete on a disputed boundary. She hung up. By noon, 2 HOA board members and a Bright Path truck were parked outside my eastern gate. I met them there. Marissa arrived 10 minutes later carrying her leather folder. She pointed through the fence. We need access. For what? To inspect the damage. I opened the gate after making it clear they were entering with my permission solely to inspect the fixtures. Marissa didn't like that sentence. I liked having witnesses hear it. The Bright Path supervisor walked from pole to pole, taking measurements and photographs. At the 4th fixture, he stopped. His eyes moved toward the old fence line, then toward his tablet. I noticed. Problem. No, too fast. Where did your installation coordinates come from? He glanced at Marissa. Project documentation. Did your company survey the boundary? Marissa answered for him. The HOA already established the improvement corridor. I looked at the supervisor. He said nothing. That silence stayed with me. 5 days later, the certified envelope arrived. $96,000. The amount was ridiculous enough. But Marissa had included 14 photographs to prove liability. I spread them across my kitchen table beneath the yellow light over the sink. Jasper. Broken pole. Mabel. Cracked footing. Otis. Shattered fixture. Then photograph number 11 stopped me. Behind Jasper was the weathered cedar post from my old fence. 30 feet beyond it, almost hidden by grass, sat the orange cap of an original survey pin. I pulled out the property plat from my filing cabinet. Then I looked at the photograph again. The coffee beside me went cold. Marissa had sent me evidence. Just not the evidence she thought she had. I picked up my phone and called a licensed surveyor. I need a boundary marked. How soon? I stared at that $96,000 invoice. As soon as you can get here. The survey truck arrived at 7:03 Monday morning. I was already waiting beside the eastern pasture with coffee in one hand and Marissa's invoice folded inside my jacket. The surveyor, Grant Holloway, stepped out carrying a bright yellow equipment case. You, Caleb? That depends. You bringing good news? He smiled. I bring measurements. People decide whether they're good. Fair enough. Grant and his assistant started with my deed, the recorded plat, and the monument references from the county file. Then they disappeared into the wet grass with a metal detector. For 20 minutes, all I heard was wind moving through cottonwoods and Jasper chewing hay behind me. Then the detector chirped. Grant crouched. His assistant scraped away soil. An iron pin appeared beneath 3 inches of earth. Orange cap. Original boundary monument. Grant set up his total station. The instrument beeped as he sighted the next point. I watched numbers appear on his screen. How bad? He didn't answer immediately. That told me plenty. They located another monument near the southern corner, checked both against recorded coordinates, then began measuring the light poles. The first one sat 32 feet inside my parcel. The second was 35, then 38, 41. The farthest was 47 feet across the legal boundary. Not inches. Not some ambiguous strip where 2 surveys could reasonably disagree. Feet. Grant looked down the row. Who installed these? The people asking me for $96,000. He gave me a sideways glance. That should be an interesting conversation. By noon, fresh wooden stakes with pink ribbon marked the property line. The lights stood unmistakably on my side. I photographed everything. Wide shots, measurements, survey markers, concrete footings. Even Jasper, who wandered over and inspected one ribbon until I chased him away before he could eat my evidence. Grant promised a stamped boundary survey within 2 days. I called Marissa. She answered on the 4th ring. I had the boundary surveyed. A pause. And, your lights are between 32 and 47 feet inside my property. That's impossible. I'm looking at the stakes. The HOA has an easement. There it was. Not ownership. An easement. What kind? A community infrastructure easement. Send it. I don't need to justify recorded rights to you. If those rights cross my deed, you do. She hung up. The document arrived from the HOA attorney that afternoon. I printed it at my kitchen table and read every line. Then I read it again. The easement dated back to the subdivision development. It allowed underground drainage infrastructure, stormwater maintenance, and temporary access necessary to service those systems. Nothing about decorative lighting. Nothing about security poles. Nothing granting the HOA possession of the surface. I called Grant. Does this easement change your boundary? No. Easements don't change ownership. They grant whatever use the document specifies. That distinction was about to become very expensive for Silver Pines. The next morning, Marissa arrived at my gate. She didn't get out of her SUV. I walked over carrying a copy of the easement. You found it, she said. I did. Then you understand the HOA has rights there. I held up the pages. For drainage and related infrastructure. Show me where it says lighting. Her mouth tightened. The board's interpretation doesn't move my property line. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Pink survey ribbons snapped in the wind behind me. Marissa looked past my shoulder. At the stakes. At the damaged poles. At the pasture she had been calling an HOA improvement corridor. Then she turned back to me. The damage claim still stands. That surprised me. You're still billing me? Your animals destroyed installed improvements. I almost argued. Instead, I folded the easement and slipped it into my jacket. Then send me everything. Her eyebrows lifted. Everything. Installation contract. Project map. Invoices. Approvals. Contractor instructions. Full breakdown of the $96,000. Marissa studied me like she was trying to understand why I had stopped fighting. Then she smiled. I'll have counsel provided. Please do. She drove away. I watched the SUV disappear between the stone entrance columns. Behind me, Jasper brayed once across the pasture. Marissa thought she was documenting what I owed her. I was about to let her document exactly how those lights got onto my land. Marissa gave me exactly what I asked for. That was her second mistake. At 4:36 the next afternoon, an email from the HOA attorney landed in my inbox with 11 attachments. I made coffee, cleared the kitchen table, and started printing. Installation agreement. Project proposal. Fixture specifications. Damage estimate. Board approval. Site diagram. Bright path invoices. By the time the printer stopped humming, I had almost 80 pages spread across the table. The $96,000 suddenly had anatomy. $38,000 for replacement fixtures and poles. $21,000 for labor and equipment. $14,000 for electrical and solar components. $11,000 for landscaping restoration. The rest disappeared into engineering, administrative charges, and projected site work. I circled every number. Then I opened the installation map. A blue line marked the lighting corridor. No survey monuments. No bearings. No parcel coordinates. Just a smooth digital line running behind Silver Pines, as though somebody had drawn where they wanted the boundary to be. I compared it with Grant's preliminary survey. The difference wasn't subtle. The HOA's line crossed deep into my parcel. My phone rang. Grant. Stamped survey is ready. Tell me nothing changed. Nothing changed. I drove to his office before sunset. He handed me 3 certified copies. Every light location was marked. Every boundary monument was referenced. The nearest pole sat 32 feet inside my property. The farthest sat 47. I drove home with the survey on the passenger seat. But I still didn't contact Marissa. Something bothered me. Bright Path was a professional contractor. Maybe they hadn't performed a boundary survey, but installing an entire line of permanent fixtures from a vague HOA sketch seemed careless. So I called the project manager listed on the contract. His name was Russell Dean. I'm trying to understand what your crew used to place the Silver Pines lights. A pause. Are you with the HOA? No. I'm the adjoining landowner. Longer pause. I should probably refer you to our office. Did you warn them about the boundary? Silence. Then, you need to request the project correspondence. That was enough. I went back through the attachments. Nothing. No emails. No field notes. No coordinate instructions. The HOA had sent contracts and invoices, but not the communications behind them. I forwarded the package to a property attorney named Claire Donovan, someone I'd worked with on access disputes involving farm fencing. She called 20 minutes later. Do not pay this invoice. Wasn't planning to, and stopped discussing liability directly with Marissa. Gladly, Claire requested the complete project file from HOA counsel, including communications with Bright Path concerning placement, surveys, and boundary verification. The response came 2 days later. Another PDF. 112 pages. I searched for boundary. 9 results. The 7th made my pulse jump. It was an email from Russell Dean sent 12 days before installation. Before mobilization, BrightPath recommends verification of the western property boundary, provided HOA mapping does not contain sufficient survey control to confirm fixture placement relative to the adjoining Whitmore parcel. Below it was Marissa's reply. No additional survey required. Proceed according to the approved association improvement map. Approved, M. Langford. I leaned back. Rain tapped softly against the kitchen window. She had been warned. Not after the lights broke. Before the first hole was drilled. I printed the email and placed it beside the $96,000 demand. For nearly 2 weeks, Marissa had treated that invoice like a weapon. Now I had her signature authorizing construction after the contractor specifically recommended verifying my boundary. Claire called again. You still have the original envelope? File. Photographs. Every one. Survey. 3 certified copies. Good. She paused. Now let her send whatever she wants. The following morning, another certified letter arrived. Final notice. Payment required. I read it once, slid it into the growing binder, and smiled. Marissa thought she was building a collection case. Page by page, she was building mine. The pink survey ribbons changed the way Marissa drove past my property. Before Grant marked the boundary, her white SUV would slow near the eastern pasture like she was inspecting HOA territory. Afterward, she stopped looking. That told me she understood those stakes perfectly. Claire understood something else. The boundary is only half the problem, she said, spreading Grant's certified survey across her conference table. The other half is what they believe gave them permission to build there. She placed the drainage easement beside it. The documents overlapped across polished wood. One showed ownership. The other showed limited rights. Silver Pines had permission to maintain underground drainage infrastructure across a defined strip of my property. That meant crews could enter when necessary to inspect or repair those systems. It did not turn my pasture into HOA land. It did not authorize decorative security lights. And it definitely did not give Marissa 47 extra feet because a board map said so. Claire tapped the BrightPath email. This is what interests me most. Boundary verification recommended before installation. Then Marissa's response. No additional survey required. Proceed. For words had cost her more credibility than any argument I could have made. Claire drafted a formal response disputing the $96,000 demand and requesting that Silver Pines suspend collection activity while the property issue was reviewed. We attached nothing. Not yet. That was deliberate. I wanted to know how far Marissa would go without seeing everything we had. The answer came quickly. 3 days later, Silver Pines sent another letter. The HOA claimed the lights were installed pursuant to long-standing community use and its recorded infrastructure easement. Long-standing? The poles had been standing for less than a month. I read that sentence twice. Then I laughed. Claire didn't. Good, she said. Good. They've committed to a theory. She requested the board resolution approving the project. That document arrived the following afternoon. Silver Pines had authorized $71,400 for installation of a perimeter security and beautification system along the western edge of the subdivision. Attached was the same inaccurate improvement map. Marissa's signature appeared at the bottom, but the $96,000 damage claim now created another problem for them. They were demanding more money from me to replace improvements their own records showed they had installed without verifying the boundary. I walked the pasture that evening with copies tucked under my arm. The damaged poles looked different now, not because they had moved, because I finally understood what they represented. Jasper wandered beside me until he stopped near one of Grant's stakes. The pink ribbon fluttered inches from his nose. Don't eat that. He stared at me. I'm serious. His lips moved toward it. I pulled the ribbon higher. At least one member of this dispute respected boundaries poorly enough already. Near the northern end, I found something Grant had marked on the survey. A drainage cleanout. It sat exactly where the easement said it should. Underground pipe beneath it. Maintenance access around it. 36 feet away stood one of Marissa's lights. That visual difference mattered. The easement had a purpose. The lights had simply been placed wherever the HOA's map told BrightPath to put them. The next morning, Claire sent Silver Pines our response package. certified survey, recorded deed, drainage easement, photographs, bright path as warning, Marissa's written approval, and one final request. Identify the specific recorded instrument authorizing permanent decorative lighting on the Whitmore parcel. The HOA attorney acknowledged receipt at 9:12. Nothing else arrived that day, or the next. Then, Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Marissa. I let it go to voicemail. Her message lasted 27 seconds. Caleb, I think this situation has become unnecessarily adversarial. Perhaps we can discuss a reasonable compromise before attorneys make it more complicated. I listened twice. No demand. No deadline. No $96,000. Just compromise. I looked through the kitchen window toward those pink steaks. For the first time since the invoice arrived, Marissa wasn't telling me what I owed. She was asking what it would take to make the problem disappear. I didn't call Marissa back. Claire did. That distinction mattered. By Monday morning, Silver Pines knew any conversation about compromise would happen in writing, with lawyers copied and every sentence preserved. Marissa responded by becoming reasonable, or at least sounding reasonable. The HOA offered to reduce my $96,000 assessment to $28,500 if I acknowledged responsibility for the damaged fixtures and agreed not to challenge the location of the remaining lights. Claire forwarded the proposal with one sentence. They want you to validate the installation. I stared at it. $28,000 wasn't the point. Neither was $96,000. If I signed that agreement, Silver Pines could later point to my signature and argue that I'd accepted their right to maintain permanent improvements inside my property. No, Claire laughed softly. I assumed. Counteroffer. Not yet. Instead, we asked one more question. Had the $71,400 lighting project been approved using HOA reserve funds or a special assessment? That answer arrived accidentally. A Silver Pines homeowner named Thomas Avery pulled into my driveway the next evening. He was in his 60s, wearing a navy windbreaker and the exhausted expression of someone who had spent too much time reading HOA financial statements. You're Whitmore. Caleb. He held up a packet. We paid for those lights. Apparently, Silver Pines residents had been charged a security improvement assessment earlier that year. Marissa had told them the project would illuminate association-controlled perimeter land and improve neighborhood safety. Thomas pointed toward my pasture. Now I'm hearing they're on your property. According to a licensed survey. His mouth tightened. Did the board know? I can tell you the contractor recommended boundary verification before installation. And I hesitated. Then I showed him the email. Thomas read Marissa's reply. His jaw shifted. Can I get a copy? Ask the board for the project file. That was safer. I wasn't interested in recruiting homeowners into my fight. I didn't need to. The documents could do that themselves. By Wednesday, Claire received notice that several residents had requested inspection of the lighting project records. Thursday morning, Silver Pines scheduled a special board meeting. Marissa emailed me an invitation. Her message was short. Your attendance may help resolve outstanding issues. This time, I accepted. Before the meeting, Claire and I organized everything into 6 tabs. Deed, certified survey, recorded easement, installation map, bright path warning, Marissa's approval. The $96,000 invoice went in front. Claire tapped it. Let them present first. That evening, the Silver Pines clubhouse parking lot was full. I could smell fresh mulch from the landscaped entrance as I walked inside, carrying one binder. Marissa sat at the center of a long folding table beneath the HOA logo. About 50 homeowners filled the room. Thomas sat in the second row. Marissa wore a dark blue blazer and the expression she'd used at my gate the first day. Controlled. Certain. The meeting began with landscaping updates and pool maintenance. Then she reached my case. As many residents know, association property was recently damaged by livestock belonging to an adjoining landowner. A photograph appeared on the projector. Jasper beside a bent pole. A few people murmured. Marissa continued. The board has attempted in good faith to recover repair costs. Claire leaned toward me. Wait. Marissa displayed the $96,000 assessment. Then the damage photographs. Then the HOA improvement map. Finally, she said the sentence we'd been waiting for. These fixtures were installed within an established association infrastructure corridor. Claire stood. May we respond? Marissa's smile tightened. Briefly, I carried the binder to the front. The room smelled like coffee and floor polish. I placed Grant's certified survey beside Marissa's map. Then I turned it toward the homeowners. I'm not here to argue that my donkeys touched those lights. The room went quiet. They did. I tapped the first marked pole. What I'm asking is why Silver Pines installed it 32 feet inside my property. Then the next. 35. Another. 41. I stopped at the last fixture. 47 feet. Marissa's face changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. And we hadn't even reached her email yet. Marissa recovered quickly. That survey reflects Mr. Whitmore's interpretation of the boundary. Grant would have enjoyed that. I didn't. A licensed surveyor doesn't interpret where you want a line to be, I said. He locates the recorded boundary. Claire placed my deed beside the survey. Then she laid down the easement. Marissa leaned toward her microphone. As I explained, Silver Pines possesses infrastructure rights across that area. Claire nodded. Correct. For underground drainage, stormwater maintenance, and access necessary to service those systems. She turned the document toward the homeowners. Nothing here authorizes permanent decorative lighting. The room changed. Chairs creaked. Someone whispered behind me. Thomas raised his hand. Were homeowners told these lights were going on HOA property? Marissa looked irritated. The project followed the association's approved improvement map. I opened the binder. Tab 4. The map appeared on the projector. A clean blue line marked the supposed corridor. Then Claire displayed Grant's certified survey beside it. The blue line wasn't merely inaccurate. It wandered across my parcel like the actual boundary didn't exist. A woman near the aisle spoke. We paid a special assessment for this. Marissa exhaled. This meeting is about damage caused by Mr. Whitmore's livestock. That was the pivot. Bring everyone back to the donkeys. Make Jasper the villain. I stood. You're right about one thing. Marissa looked at me. My animals damaged some of those fixtures. I've never denied that. I placed the photographs she had sent me on the table. In fact, your pictures helped me locate the problem. I pointed to photograph 11. Old cedar post. Orange survey cap. Jasper standing between them and the damaged light. That photograph is why I ordered the survey. Nobody laughed. Nobody needed to. The irony was already sitting on the screen. Marissa's attorney whispered something to her. She shook her head. Claire opened tab 5. There's one additional document. Marissa went still. That was the first moment I knew she remembered. Brightpath project manager Russell Dean's email appeared on the screen. Boundary verification recommended before installation. Provided HOA mapping does not contain sufficient survey control to confirm fixture placement relative to the adjoining Whitmore parcel. The room became completely silent. Then Claire displayed the reply beneath it. No additional survey required. Proceed according to the approved association improvement map. Approved M. Langford. Thomas spoke first. You were warned. Marissa's face flushed. The contractor raised a routine procedural concern. And you ignored it? I relied on association records. Another homeowner stood. Why didn't you spend money on a survey before spending $71,000 on lights? A second voice came from the back. And now we're paying lawyers because you billed him $96,000. Marissa reached for her microphone. This discussion is becoming inappropriate. That was when Claire placed the original damage assessment in front of her. $96,000. The same number that had started everything. The association demanded payment based on the premise that Mr. Whitmore's livestock damaged HOA improvements, Claire said. But the association has not identified any recorded instrument authorizing those permanent improvements on his parcel. Marissa's attorney leaned forward. We should recess. Nobody objected. The board disappeared into a side room. For 25 minutes, homeowners stayed in their seats, talking quietly. I stood near the coffee table. Thomas walked over. What happens now? That depends on them. You going after the HOA? I looked toward the closed conference room door. I want my boundary respected. That was all. When the board returned, Marissa didn't speak. The vice president did. Effective immediately, collection of the $96,000 damage assessment was suspended pending legal review. Repairs to the lighting system were also suspended. An independent property attorney would review the installation. Then came the sentence I had waited weeks to hear. No association representative or contractor will enter the disputed area without Mr. Whitmore's permission while that review is pending. I looked at Marissa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The $96,000 wasn't gone yet. But something more important had disappeared. Her certainty. And once people started checking the boundary instead of trusting her map, I knew it wasn't coming back. 3 weeks later, the $96,000 disappeared. Not gradually. Not through negotiation. Silver Pines withdrew the assessment in writing. I was standing beside my barn when Claire called. Morning frost still covered the pasture, and every breath Jasper took appeared as a white cloud around his muzzle. "They're dropping the claim," she said. "All of it. All 96,000. I looked toward the eastern boundary. The damaged lights were still there, dark and crooked. "What about the poles?" "That part gets better." The independent property attorney hired by Silver Pines had completed his review. Grant's survey held. My deed held. The drainage easement meant exactly what Claire said it meant. Silver Pines possessed limited rights to access and maintain drainage infrastructure. It did not own my pasture. It had no documented right to install permanent decorative lighting there. The settlement was surprisingly simple. Silver Pines would withdraw its damage demand. The HOA would remove the lighting equipment from my parcel, repair disturbed ground, and coordinate access through Claire. I agreed not to obstruct legitimate drainage maintenance covered by the existing easement. Nobody received a fantasy $1 million payout. Nobody went to jail. Nobody needed to. The property line did enough. The harder consequences happened inside Silver Pines. Homeowners demanded a financial review of the lighting project. They wanted to know why $71,400 had been approved using an improvement map after BrightPath specifically recommended boundary verification. They wanted to know why legal fees had been spent trying to collect $96,000 from me after Grant's survey showed the fixtures were on my property. And they especially wanted to know why Marissa had offered me a reduced settlement if I agreed not to challenge the location of the lights. That question apparently made the next board meeting uncomfortable. Thomas called afterward. She resigned as president. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Marissa, effective immediately." He sounded almost disappointed that there hadn't been fireworks. There rarely are. Real consequences usually arrive through emails, votes, signatures, and people quietly deciding they no longer trust you with authority. BrightPath removed the remaining poles the following month. I watched from the pasture while their equipment pulled the concrete footings from the soil. Diesel engines hummed. Chains rattled. Wet earth smelled sharp in the cold air. The supervisor, Russell Dean, walked over before leaving. "For what it's worth," he said, "we should have insisted on the survey. You warned them. Still should have insisted." I respected that. Grant returned afterward to install more visible boundary markers. This time I rebuilt the livestock fence closer to the legal line while leaving proper clearance around the drainage facilities. No guessing. No vague maps. No arguments. Just measurements. By spring, grass had covered most of the scars where the lights once stood. Jasper, Mabel, and Otis went back to their usual routine. Guard the goats. Watch the tree line. Scratch themselves against things actually designed to survive livestock. I installed 3 heavy wooden rubbing posts for them. Jasper preferred the corner post anyway. Sometimes people ask whether I felt bad that my donkeys damaged those lights. The answer is complicated. My animals did damage them. I never denied that. But responsibility doesn't begin at the moment something breaks. Sometimes it begins weeks earlier, when somebody is warned to check a boundary and decides confidence is cheaper than a survey. Marissa thought the HOA map made the land theirs. She thought letterhead made the bill legitimate. She thought $96,000 would make me panic before I asked the simplest question. Where were the lights actually standing? That question changed everything. The invoice is still in my filing cabinet. So is photograph 11. Jasper beside the bent pole. The cedar post behind him. That little orange survey cap glowing through the grass. Marissa sent that picture to prove I owed her $96,000. Instead, it helped prove she had built on my land. Funny thing about property lines. They don't care who has the louder voice. And neither does the truth.